He is also known as someone who has blamed.
It's really good that they went with like an even freakier dude. What we should do instead is have an even freakier dude be prominently displayed alongside our campaign. All right,
Senator JD Vance, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us here in Cincinnati. Let's start off with the Democratic National Convention.
Sure.
Some of what we heard this past week. Vice President Kamala Harris, in making her case, said that the tariff plans that Donald Trump is proposing will hurt the middle class. Here's what she said specifically, quote,
Sure.
He intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Now, the estimates vary, but how do you respond to that charge that Trump's tariffs would hurt the middle class?
Yeah, so if you step back a little bit, Kristen, there's this whole thing that Kamala Harris did at the convention where she made a bunch of claims about what would happen and not enough actually reflection on what already happened, right? Because Donald Trump was already president. He used tariffs to bring manufacturing jobs back to our country, and I think he'll do it again. And he did it while keeping prices extremely low.
did he? What jobs did Donald Trump bring back to the United States of America? Like, we're just lying now. That's cool. I mean, pound for pound, like, Joe Brandon, literally not the greatest president of all time by any metric, okay? Fairly certain did more to bring jobs back and bring manufacturing to the United States of America than Donald Trump did. Kick streaming counts as Trump jobs? He did.
Because if you go back to the Trump presidency, we had 12,000 factories that were built during Donald Trump's presidency. Inflation never really ticked above 2% his entire administration. In fact, was sort of, around 1.5% most of the time that he was president. So when Kamala Harris says, if we do the thing that Trump already did, it's going to be way worse than it was last time, I just don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's talk about
Sure.
Trump's record during his first term. He did impose rounds of tariffs, and it cost Americans nearly $80 billion in new taxes. Do you acknowledge that imposing more tariffs will ultimately cost consumers?
Well, what it really does is it penalizes importers from bringing goods outside the country into the country. And I think that's just a necessary thing. We know that China and a number of other countries are using effectively slave labor to undercut the wages of American workers. Donald Trump thinks that has to stop. And again, what Kamala Harris is saying, Kristen, is that if you do this, you're somehow going to cause skyrocketing inflation.
If he, wait, is he talking about undocumented migrants or is he talking about third world offshoring and third world manufacturing? Either case, if he's talking about undocumented labor, then the solution to that would be obviously documenting them. It would be amnesty and also documenting them so they can participate in the labor force in the exact same structure that like the documented American laborers can, and then advocate to unionize those jobs as well. Don't think he means that, okay? He would also advocate to abolish prison labor, which is slave labor. It is legal, okay? But beyond that, COVID wiped out a lot of the manufacturing gains that Trump brought in. But the idea that Donald Trump, like, revitalized American manufacturing is completely bullshit. Is he right? No, he's not right. The real reason as to why Republicans are so gung-ho about anti-immigrant sentiments, the 12,000 factories is not true. No, I think he said 1,200, not 12,000. Obviously, the CarnegieEndowment.org is probably going to not have a favorable attitude about U.S. tariffs. How Trump's tariffs really affected the U.S. job market. A recent study on U.S.-China trade concludes that Trump's trade policy cost the U.S. economy nearly 250,000 jobs, but his obsolete understanding of trade flows end up pointing trade policymakers in the wrong direction. Why aren't both sides pro-immigrant? Either way, they're documented and participating in the labor force. That's just more tax revenue, correct? It's because having a reactionary attitude towards immigrants is really good for the Republican Party in terms of like polarizing the base, in terms of making it seem like they have a different opinion. And it also is really good at keeping those people undocumented. Because if you were to document those people, then there wouldn't be a two-tier labor structure in this country that actually does depress the wages for the rest of the working class in this country. It's cheap labor. That's it. It's endlessly exploitable, cheap labor that is always recycled. You can just very easily deport them if they chirp. That's why our entire agricultural output relies on a steady flow of undocumented migrants crossing the border. Undocumented migrants also do pay taxes currently. They put in to the American economy a lot more than they take out. They can't take to be fair. Oh, no, he for sure is talking about China and the what? Bro, this literally, That's gotta be a slur. You know what I mean? Like, bro, you did not write that like that. No way, dude. Close enough, dog? Absolutely not close enough. Bro said Uyghur with a hard R. Oh my God. Unit sheet metal worker here. I worked when we had tariffs during Trump. It actually screwed us hard and we had a lack of work coming in because it skyrocketed the price of materials to make products. And we had furloughs a few times because of a lack of revenue. Can confirm tariffs does. Yeah. Anyway.
In reality, Donald Trump already did it. He brought a lot of jobs back, and it didn't cause inflation.
But it caused consumers to pay more. They paid more in taxes, $80 billion
Okay,
worth.
to
So do
be
you
fair,
acknowledge?
This is unfair. Like, yeah, of course Biden created a shit ton more jobs, dude. Biden oversaw the COVID recovery. Like, Trump oversaw the worst aspects of the COVID lockdowns, and Biden oversaw COVID recovery. Like, that's not even a question. The U.S. added 15.8 million jobs during Biden's first 42 months in office, compared to a 2.7 million contraction during Trump's presidency. Like, well, I guess it's unfair, but also simultaneously, like, that's kind of the same thing. If the Democrats ran on that, that would literally be the same thing as like Trump being like, remember how cheap oil was, which he does all the time. He does that all the time. He's like, remember the oil was so cheap. Remember how cheap gas was under my presidency? He's like, yeah, dude, because COVID was happening. And yeah, in 2018, Trump's job numbers were already dropping before COVID hit. Yes, it's not like the situation was good, but it obviously is greatly skewed because of COVID, is what I'm trying to say. Similarly, unemployment rate rose 1.7 percentage points from 4.7 to 6.7 under Trump, declining 2.1 percentage points under Biden to the latest reading of 4.3. However, the gross data paints a wholly incomplete picture of the labor market strength under both presidents as the COVID-19 pandemic upended the global economy beginning in 2020, causing U.S. employment to briefly spike to a record 14.8 after a whopping 22 million worker contraction from February 2020 to April 2020. That skewed Trump's numbers negatively and Biden's positively as the labor market returned to relative normalcy following the unprecedented shock. In fact, the first 3 quarters of Trump's tenure were marked by a remarkably strong job market, with non-farm payrolls growing by about 7 million between January 2017 and February 2020, and unemployment declining over the same period from 4.7 to 3.5 at the same time, the lowest mark since 1969, later surpassed by January and April 2023's 3.4%. Wage growth has been slightly higher under Biden, with an average hourly earning growing by 17% under Biden thus far compared to the 15% during Trump's presidency. However, obviously, the Trump-era wage growth had a real wage growth for a lot of Americans because inflation wasn't out of control and outpacing wage growth as it did under the Biden administration for like 2 years. Oh, I just spilled highest soda all over my goddamn desk, dude. That was Brandon's fault too. But the Trump era wage growth went much further for Americans as it outpaced inflation more strongly, with the consumer price index rising by 8% from January 2017 to January 2021, compared to 19% from January 2021 to July 2024. America saved an average of 8.7 of their monthly paychecks under Trump compared to 5.9 under Biden, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysts' monthly personal savings rate metric. It's very difficult to say changes in the labor market were a product of one presidential administration versus the other. The labor market was very strong prior to COVID-19 under Trump and remains so under Biden. The macroeconomic factors driving up much of the labor market trends that were not so unique to the U.S., like the 2020's massive uptick in unemployment and labor shortages. Lots of this might just be a coincidence rather than the result of Trump and Biden's policies. Yes, it is not a surprise that the employment changes oftentimes is a massive downturn under Republican administrations, and then Democrats have to fix it, and then Republicans come back to a primed economy, and then they run the table again every single goddamn cycle. But it doesn't matter, because all that matters for people is that the cost of a subscription to avoid the 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour went from $5 under the Trump administration to $6 under the Biden administration. That's what you care about. That's what you spend your money on. You know what I mean? So yeah, at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. That's still the same. Well, I guess it was a 1-minute ad break under the early parts of the Trump administration. Now it's 3 minutes of ads in the beginning of the hour and 1 minute in the middle of the hour. You don't even know about that one because I don't tell you when I'm serving it. Secret ad break, the most dangerous of ad breaks of all. Anyway, here's the 3-minute ad break now. Why do you talk about the middle of the hour ad break like it's a treacherous bastard, son? Because it is. Stronger spending power is perhaps the best feather in Trump's cap in terms of shepherding the world's largest economy, reflected in polling, which suggests just 19% of Americans believe they're better off financially since Biden took office, compared to the 50% who think they are worse off. Just as the Biden economy benefited at a high level from inheriting a weak labor market, it was similarly doomed by grappling with a global inflation crisis, partially stemming from a variety of factors outside of Washington's control, like supply chain delays due to COVID-19. Still, the U.S. economy has been remarkably robust under both presidents. GDP, a metric which measures the total value of all goods and services produced in the U.S., is up 50% from 2015 to 2023. Under both presidents, the unemployment rate has been below where it was for the entirety of Barack Obama's 2016 presidency, marred by the fallout of the financial crisis, save for the 2020-2021 pandemic blip. By the way, a fun factoid of what you saw: if Kamala wins, it will be the first time an incoming Democrat took over an objectively good or primed economy since before Reagan. It also might be the first time in 100 plus years where an incoming Dem doesn't have the Senate. Yeah. Well, let's see what happens in Montana. But also, it's not an incoming Democrat taking over from a primed. It's an incoming Democrat that is, inheriting an economy that is on the upswing from a previous Democratic administration. So it's a little different because it's one term. If it was a 2-term recovery and then a Democrat won again, that would be unique, I think. Oh yeah, I forgot Biden was 1 term. I like to think of Biden as 0 term. I forget that he's president all the time. Yeah, it's not, that's a mistake that I make as well, chatter. Don't worry. Anyway, let's get back to this interview.
That consumers ultimately will pay more if there are more tariffs imposed.
So economists...
Do you just acknowledge that?
No, I don't, Kristen, because I think economists really disagree about the effects.
Wait, what do you mean? You don't acknowledge that? Why don't you acknowledge that? I mean, that is the case. Like, protectionist trade policy aside, like whether you agree with it or not, I don't know. But like, yeah, no, it definitely would. It definitely would be translated to the consumer. I mean, these guys say that when it comes to wage growth all the time. Oh, dude. Not only do economists think that, it's basically like, of course. Hey, it's Hasan, the OG propaganda guru. I assume when someone calls me an OG propaganda guru with a double S, this is probably not going to be someone who likes what I have to say. Double S classic, never fails. Yeah, tariffs absolutely translate cost directly back to the consumer. There is a way in which it wouldn't, I guess, if magically companies decided to cut away into their profits, but I doubt that they're going to do that. Just like I doubt that they would do that with wage growth. Economists disagree about the effects of tariffs. Oh my God, ask Grok. I'm going to die. Economist statement before the panel: imposing new U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum will improve America's welfare. Disagree 28%. Strongly disagree 65%. Agree 0%. Uncertain 0%. It's like not a thing. That's not. To be fair, economists don't agree on. No, they do agree on this. Economists literally never agree universally on anything except for, yes, tariffs will absolutely increase costs.
Of tariffs because there can be a dynamic effect, right? So what some economists will say is what you just said, that it will actually raise costs for consumers. But what other people say, and I think the record supports what this other view, is that it causes this dynamic effect where more jobs come into the country. Anything that you lose on the tariff from the perspective of the consumer, you gain in higher wages. So you're ultimately much better off. You have more take-home pay.
Wait, I thought higher wages also literally directly added to the cost. Hello? What's this guy talking about? I thought wage growth was the real reason why there was so much inflation in America. What happened? What's this guy talking about?
You have better jobs, and also we have more reliance. Because one of the things we learned during COVID, I don't, by the way, blame Democrats for this, but one of the things we learned during COVID, Kristen, is that if our supply chains are really brittle, if we depend on the Chinese to make too much of our stuff, then prices can skyrocket at a time of crisis. The economists who say that tariffs are bad, they don't take that into account. And we've all learned it the hard way.
And it is economists across the board, really. I mean, the Wall Street Journal says economic data showed that Donald Trump's trade war with China did not achieve its objectives of reversing the declines in U.S. manufacturing or reshoring factory jobs. I hear what you're saying. It's a complicated picture, but just on that bottom line point, you can't guarantee that Americans won't wind up paying a penny more, can you?
Well, I think that what you can guarantee is that if you don't bring more manufacturing jobs back into this country, you don't make our supply chains more stable, you're going to cause higher prices over the long term. I think that is what is absolute.
I think the tariff war on China stuff is like pretty crazy. It's also even crazier that Biden also ran with it too. Biden literally also personally went along with this and was like running on this as well. I suspect that it is to gear America or to like try and move America away from China in terms of like its manufacturing hub, and then like, I don't know, maybe work with like India or something. I don't know. Like it's just like Cold War 2.0. China hates us though. What? Bro, I love China. Why do we have to hate China so much? China hates us though. First of all, China doesn't hate us at all. We're the largest. We are the mouths that they feed. What are you talking about? We eat nonstop. They love our shit, dude. As long as we buy garbage, they will forever be open to that. Like the inverse of this is China trying to improve and trying to open up new consumer bases by developing African nations, like to open up new markets so that they can sell to different markets in a way to offset the potential American Cold War that will try to cut trade from China. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but who knows? I'm saying, like, as a cultural export, they hate us. What? The Africans don't want the Chinese there? I don't know about that. They want to open up African markets to move cheap manufacturing when the Chinese labor force is unwilling to do cheap labor? Yeah.
Absolutely true.
But you acknowledge they could wind up paying more.
What I acknowledge, Kristen, is that unless we bring more manufacturing jobs back to this country, we are going to end up paying more in the long term. Remember, the whole promise, now, again, this was a bipartisan thing. My own party was as wrong about it as Democrats were, and Donald Trump was right about it. What they said is that if you shipped all of our manufacturing to East Asia and to Mexico, Americans would pay lower prices. Well, here we are now, and Americans are paying higher prices. And just one more thing on this, Kristen, because it's really important to go at what Kamala Harris actually said in her convention speech. She says that she wants to stand up to China on behalf of American workers. If you're not willing to impose tariffs on companies that are manufacturing in China, using slave labor in China, you're not standing up to the Chinese, and Americans are really going to suffer.
And on pricing and prices right now, inflation obviously at its lowest level since 2021. But let's move on. Robert F. Kennedy, the big news yesterday.
Very big news.
He suspended his campaign, announced he's endorsing Donald Trump. He is also known as someone who has blamed vaccines for autism, antidepressants for school shootings, and
it's really good that they went with like an even freakier dude. They were like, hey, JD Vance keeps talking about femoids, and that is not playing really well. What we should do instead is have an even freakier dude be prominently displayed alongside our campaign. Like a guy who objectively looks like he was like he is overtaken by, like, there's videos of him that he put out of himself as a part of his campaign strategy where he's surrounded by bugs, like bugs are crawling all over his skin.
And recently said, quote, he won't take sides on what happened on 9/11.
Sounds like a derogatory term for females. It is. I'm saying, like, JD Vance is doing like incel speak. Femoids.
Do you have any hesitation about accepting his endorsement?
No, Kristen, I don't, because we're going to disagree on issues, right? There are things that Robert Kennedy has said that I disagree with. I'm sure there are things that he said, or that I've said, excuse me, that he's going to disagree with. But I think what his endorsement represents is that Donald J. Trump's Republican Party is a big tent party. I was raised by two grandparents who are sort of classic blue dog Democrats. They believed in having a border. They believed that you shouldn't have censorship in the United States of America. They believed in common sense economic policies. They may have disagreed with Donald Trump about tax policy, but they believed in some fundamental American values. And I think what RFK's endorsement really shows is that the Kennedy Democrats are actually more at home in the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris's party, higher prices, doing nothing to fight back against the Chinese, to say nothing of a wide open border. That is not JFK's Democratic Party. It's not RFK's Democratic Party. We're thrilled to have the Kennedy Democrats where they belong.
Well, and some in the Kennedy family have stepped forward to say that they sharply disagree with this endorsement. But let's just go back very quickly. He says he isn't taking sides on 9/11. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, of course I don't agree with that, Kristen. Now, to be clear, I don't know what RFK actually said there. Maybe there was additional context. Of course, you actually have to see what people say before you agree or disagree with it. I certainly have taken sides in 9/11. I'm the pro-America side. I don't think that we should have been attacked, and I certainly think hitting back against the terrorists was justified. I don't know what RFK said there, but what I do know is that RFK said a lot of very interesting and important things, that the Democratic Party has become too pro-censorship, that the Democratic Party, especially in the wake of COVID, became...
Yeah. See, if the media had like any sort of backbone, they'd be like, okay, you've said that like like anti-Israel protesters should be not the, I don't think he said exactly those words, but you know, something akin to that. How does that play with the fact that you say the Democratic Party is pro-censorship? It kind of seems like you're pro-censorship as well. Or the book burnings that the Florida Republican Party has actively pushed for and successfully implemented.
Really anti-freedom and anti-child. I mean, you have Democrats saying that we should be masking toddlers in their schools, even though we knew it caused developmental...
Like, masking toddlers in schools is not a point of contention you can run on in 2024. You're only lasering in on some of the biggest freaks that are still thinking about this, okay?
disabilities. I agree with RFK that that was crazy.
Well, to be fair, there was a lot of information that scientists were grappling with as it came in, and masks were perceived to stop the spread of the disease. Let's move on.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
But the one thing before we move on that I would say on that is there were important leaders. Donald Trump was among them. RFK was among them, who were saying some of this stuff is crazy. And if we had listened to them, I think our kids would have been much better off in the wake of the pandemic.
I mean, scientists did show that masks help to stop the spread of the disease. Let's talk about another big issue.
Disabilities for toddlers, right? We have to be able to balance this stuff. And I think the way that RFK struck that balance.
Yeah.
Is this regressive COVID conversation a benefit or a hindrance to Trump? No, it's massive hindrance. Remember, Trump's cult base already is locked in. Think about like, I don't know, your friend's father who like is kind of conservative, okay? Doesn't like Trump, but is like been a conservative his whole life. Like, is that guy going to be like, hell yeah, they did. They masked the goddamn kids.
Was much smarter, unfortunately, than the way that Kamala Harris did.
Let's talk about another big issue that was talked about at the Democratic National Convention. It's being...
Bro, this is worse than... They're doing jib-jab memes, dude, in 2024. This is a generationally bad run, dog. This is so... God damn, dude. This is so bad. Holy shit.
We talked about on the campaign trail, abortion.
Sure.
Democrats made the case this week and beyond this week that Donald Trump, if elected, will impose a federal ban on abortion if he wins. Now, Donald Trump says he won't, but can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say, what has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California, and California has to respect Ohio.
Why? One must ask the question, why then? Like, so murder is okay in California, but it's not okay in Ohio? Is abortion really murder? No front, but why your arms look like a failed steroid cure? Because I currently have big ass sleeves that make my arms look actually kind of fat and not muscular, even though they are. Okay? Just saying. It's kind of dumb. It's kind of dumb to be like, abortion is murder, but we also want Democrats to be able to murder babies in California. Not a good idea.
Donald Trump's view
doesn't make
is
sense.
That we want the individual states and their individual cultures and their unique political sensibilities to make these decisions, because we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue, the federal government ought to be focused on getting food prices down and getting housing prices down. Issues, of course, where Kamala Harris has been a total disaster. So I think Donald Trump is right. We want the federal government to focus on these big economic and immigration questions. Let the states figure out their own abortion policy.
Let me just follow up with you a little bit on that point, because I've been talking to Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham just last week, who've made it very clear that if Donald Trump is elected, if you are elected,
What happened to Tulsi Gabbard? She used to be a progressive. She was never a progressive. She was always a grifter. I was the #1 Tulsi Gabbard hater from the jump, and so many cranks yelled at me, many of which are named Jimmy Dore and Jimmy Dore fans. Okay? So many cranks who back then were the real leftists, and I was a phony one. Okay? God damn, so many. What is it like? There's a bunch of them on Twitter too. Throughout my 10-year political broadcasting career, dude, I've had so many be like, Hasan's a grifter, Hasan's a fake, Hasan's a phony. Every single one of those people are now straight up right wing. Every single one to a T. Every single one. Well,
8 to 10.
I think my keyboard is busted.
Hey, everybody.
Uh-oh.
Tonight, Vice President.
One can thrive.
I gotta fix my keyboard is broken. No, it's the disconnect. The soda. Oh, dude. Wait, let me see if it worked. The soda. Minnesota. Let's see if it worked. Let's see if I can fix it. Okay, I fixed it. I don't know how, but I found this clip on you on Tulsi in 2019.
I'm glad that Tulsi is the only one who's fucking out there fighting for these wars to end. It's just like such a one-trick pony. Holy shit. And I don't even believe in it. I don't believe in her. I hate to say it, but I want to, but I don't believe in her at all.
That's literally a photo of Jank behind me.
Then you too can be smeared. Your character can be smeared.
Cool. I'm glad that
This was 2019. This is earlier than 2019. That's in like the New Jersey. That's in the New Jersey house. My grandparents' New Jersey house. That no longer even exists. And it's a photo of, yeah, I'm on a MacBook. This is before 2019. Putting Jank on the wall like he's Stalin. Bro, it was his room. What do you mean?
Tulsi is the only one who's fucking out there fighting.
Oh, it is 2019. Never mind. Look at the video date. Well, we all saw politics stuff you lined up for us today, so there's no point in going through it again. So gaming now, Peepo Shy. Okay. That clipper is still in here. Damn. That's long-term commitment, dude. Did your career explode in the last 5 years only? Yes. After I went full-time. After I went full-time in 2020, that's when my career popped off. World War 2.0 won't work. The U.S. wasn't economically dependent on the Soviet Union. I agree. All right, the rest of this stuff is kind of boring. But let's see Michael Costa talk to some extremely confident Dems.